in chapter 13 over here, prishut, abstinence. Abstinence means just because it's permitted doesn't mean you do it. It brings you closer to Hashem. We spoke about yesterday the Wagyu beef, right? The Wagyu beef. Will it make me say, Marabu Ma'asecha Hashem? How great is Hashem's creations? Or will it feed my Yetzer Hara and make me more and more of a connoisseur and make me more and more chasing desires of this world? Or bring me closer to Hashem? Everybody needs a break. Everybody needs a vacation. The question is, did I go for my vacation to fulfill my desires, or did I go my vacation in order to come back with strength? That's the big difference. So over here, the sages say, person has to pray that before the desires of this world and the food of this world enters my stomach, the words of Torah should enter my stomach. But if you can't have both. There's no such thing. I'm totally in Olam Hazeh and I'm in totally Olam Haba. It's a contradiction. You're always going to be caught between two worlds. And a person who says, I can walk this tightrope of not falling into the sin while enjoying so much Olam Hazeh, you are joking yourself. There is no guarantor when it comes to these things. Rabbi, I have a question. Who says we have to make more things forbidden in the Torah? I don't understand. If the Torah permitted it, so yeah, that's it. Why do we have to make more things upon ourselves, to take upon ourselves to not to avoid certain things? Why? It says the Messiah Shalmi, it's not enough what the Torah says is forbidden. You have to go and add extra things to make it more asur. So therefore, he says, she'en gula davar. You could say there's no limit to the matter. The Yerushalmi says, Shalmi, listen to this. Atid adam niten din lifnei makom al kol ma שראו עיניו ולא רצה לאכול ממנו. אף על פי שהיה מותר והיה יכול. The Yerushalmi says, a person will be held accountable on Judgment Day for not partaking in the goods of Hashem's world. Hashem says, I created Wagyu beef. I created, special, 50-year-old bottled wine. I created, the special reserve Macallan. I set aside the Jurassic Park steak. I set aside a lot of good things in this world. Why didn't you partake from these things? And praise me and bless me. So it's a good reason why I shouldn't be an abstinent. I shouldn't be a hasid. If it's permitted, yallah, let's go. What's the problem? So it says, Meselet Shirim, you don't understand. He says that what happens? He says, you're right, in a perfect world, that's what we should do. It says by Rebbe Akadosh, he was so wealthy. He had both two tables. He was super wealthy Olam Hazeh, and he was super wealthy Olam Haba, meaning he had a lot of mitzvot. He was Rebbe Akadosh. He compiled the Mishnah. He was the leader of the generation. In the winter, he used to have every delicacy you would want in the middle of the winter. Can you imagine you live in a desert and you get ice delivered to your door? Oh, you pay top dollar for this. Yes, Rebbe used to have every single fruit, every single delicacy you would want. Nietu in the market. Somehow Rebbe got it because he had connections, he knows the guy, he's wealthy, everybody knows him, and he gets special deliveries get done for him. And at the end of his life, what did he say? He said, first of all, you should know, lo kol adam zocheh, the Gemara says. Not every person is zocheh to have both. Usually people either have olam haba or the olam hazeh. It's very hard to have both. Rebbe was one of the exceptions, he had both. But before he died, what did he say? He put up his 10 fingers to Shamayim and he said, Hashem, you should know, I didn't do any of this. This stole, this table I used to open and put all this stuff on, you should know, you know yourself that I myself, not for one of my fingers I enjoyed all this stuff for myself. I did everything for your kavod. I did it for the community. I did it for the kavod of the rabbi should live a certain life and represent the community as such. I didn't do it for my personal desires. Now, in a perfect world, that's what Yerushalmi is talking about. The Yerushalmi is saying, well, why didn't you eat my good food in this world and give me praise? But says the Siyat Sharim, who are we to say we're like that? How? He says most people, they're very weak and they're vulnerable and they fall into the trap of the Yetzer Hara and they don't do it to serve Hashem. They do it because of their desires. So, for example, a person who becomes so accustomed to good wine, so accustomed to tasty delicacies, he becomes dependent on them. You go and you take these kids who are spoiled and you cut them off from these things, you send them to Israel. I spoke about this before. They start kvetching. Oh, we don't have Costco here. Oh, we don't have all the amenities America does. What kind of life is this? Abba, I hate this. Take me home.
shower 2 minutes.
Right, you're not allowed to use the hot water, right? We said this before. So imagine a guy, he lives his life with all these delicacies, always fine dining, and then what? He gets so accustomed to it. There's people in Manhattan, they don't even eat dinner anymore at home. They can't eat a dinner at home anymore. I can't eat at home. Why? Because there's so many better options. Why would I want to eat at home? I have to go eat there. And then one day, if I can't eat there, and one day, what if I tell you this restaurant it's not Bet Yosef? Or you sit down at the restaurant, everybody tells you, if you go to this restaurant, you have to try the steak. Oh, Chaval Azman. It's a waste of time, Chaval Azman, right? And then what? And then they tell you it's not Bet Yosef. Oh, Hashem, my desires. And since I go out every day, or I am always accustomed to certain fine dining, my desires are so strong now because I always feed it. So now it's a big judgment call. And you're probably going to fall, says the Mesillas Yesharim. You're probably going to fall. So therefore, a person has to be careful not to get accustomed to depend on these things. And because they become necessities from, instead of luxuries being luxuries, I don't need it, it becomes necessities. Should something happen where he can't afford these, or where it's forbidden to him, he will still satisfy his wants. And now look at how many people steal to live a certain luxurious lifestyle. Why? Because I have to have it. Right? Or people do things you eat things and do things they're not allowed to do. Why? Because I have to have it. Why? Because the clutches, the klippah, are on him. Because he gave in and he gave in and he gave in and he gave in. So therefore he says it can become food, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, designer clothing. All these things could grab onto you and not let go. And a person has to know, we have to remember, there's a famous book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? You have to be the rich guy who always stays the poor guy inside, right? You don't get the money, get to your head, and you always have to remember, I don't need any of these things. Tomorrow, God forbid, I lose all this stuff, I will be perfectly fine. I will not have a mental breakdown. Even though the halacha says that Hillel, he found a guy who was rich and became poor, and every day he used to go into the town with a carriage. So he hired a carriage, and nobody could pull the carriage for him in the wagon. So Hillel himself pulled the wagon carrying this poor guy, this rich guy who became poor. Why? Because the highest level of tzedakah is to bring back the person to where he used to be. But what? But you don't demand these things. You understand? If he gives it to you, he gives it to you. But you don't demand these things. You have to, once you go down, you have to, this is what this is what it is. I don't have to be dependent on certain things. And that way, because the chibut kever, what's chibut kever? The beating of the grave. When a guy goes in the grave, they have to separate you from Yetzer Hara. So the more you're entrenched in Yetzer Hara, the harder the chibut kever is, the harder the whipping is, the harder it is to separate you from this world and from the Yetzer Hara. So a person has to pray to Hashem. Hashem, yes, we may eat and we may live in this world and enjoy the nice things. We may try to keep up with the Joneses, but we cannot let that become part and parcel of who I am. I am not who I am because of my clothes that I wear, the food that I eat, the association I make with certain people. I am who I am because this is who I was from the beginning, and this is who I am as a neshama first and a body second. Baruch Olam.